Lawrence, go ahead and have a seat. We'll just start setting you up here.
Is she like driver?
This program is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.
All right, let's talk about Richard Onley first.
Yes.
Is this Mr. Onley?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mr. Onley, you filed a motion to continue the
Yes.
case? Okay. Is that still your request?
Yeah, I think it would be, yes.
What's the state's position on that, Mr. McLaughlin?
Well, his case has been scheduled for trial for some time. The state moved to consolidate his case as well as Mr. Troyer's, as well as Mr. Siegel's. Mr. Siegel recently asked for a continuance, which I did not object to. His request was in order to obtain legal counsel. I'm not sure Mr. Onley's request is for the same purpose, so I'm not sure if a continuance is needed in this particular case.
Has it been previously continued?
It has not.
Yeah, and there is another trial that's going to take place with
With Mr. Siegel?
with Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Okay.
January 24th, Your Honor, at 9 o'clock as we scheduled.
All right. Is there any reason why this case couldn't be consolidated with that one?
As long as there's an agreement that they be consolidated, I don't have a problem.
Mr. Onley, any problem with that?
I don't think so for right now.
All right, so if we grant your motion and reschedule it for January the 24th at 10 o'clock?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll do that.
All right.
Okay, would you mind just stepping back then and having a seat in the gallery there, please? All right, so this is Mr. Troy, is that right, sir?
Yes.
Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, and are we proceeding on the one that says replacement complaint?
Correct, the violation level criminal trespass.
Okay, the misdemeanor, you want to
I
mark
can have
that?
no process or as it is.
So, Mr. Troyer, there was originally a Class A misdemeanor charge brought for criminal trespass. That one's being withdrawn by the state. We're going to proceed on the violation level, non-criminal level, criminal trespass that is dated October the 4th. Do you have a copy of that?
I don't have it with me.
Did you have received a copy?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I meant to bring it and I forgot.
Well, as long as you've received a copy, that's fine.
I have a question about what you just said. How is it called criminal trespass if it's not at the criminal level?
It's just the way the statute title is worded. There are a number of statutes where there's a criminal mischief, for example. Some of that is violation level as well. It just depends on the title of the statute. That's all. It doesn't refer to the actual nature of the charge.
What is the difference between a misdemeanor and a violation?
A violation is a non-criminal offense. In other words, you don't get a criminal record if you're convicted of the charge. It's like a speeding charge, which is a non-criminal charge. If it were a Class A or a Class B misdemeanor, then it would represent a criminal conviction if you were convicted. Okay? All set to proceed here? All right. Mr. McLaughlin?
Say we call Major John Musso. Swear testimony about the minutes matter with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please have a seat and introduce yourself for the record.
My name is John Mousseau. That's Mousseea.
And where do you work?
I work at Cheshire County Department of Corrections.
And how long have you worked at the Cheshire County Department of Corrections?
A little over 15 years.
And what are your duties? You work at the Cheshire County House of Corrections?
Yes.
And what are your duties at the Cheshire County House of Corrections?
I'm the Director of Safety and Security. I oversee the safety and security of the building, and that includes all of the cameras and electronic devices in the building.
And sometime this spring, the House of Corrections moved from its old location in Westmoreland to its current location here in Phoenix.
That is correct.
And do you recall when that was approximately?
It's April 22nd.
Are you familiar with the camera system at the new Cheshire County House of Corrections?
Yes, I am.
And are there a number of cameras directed at the outside of the facility and its grounds?
Yes, there is.
And does the system that you have in place continually capture and store images around the facility?
Yes, it does.
And are you able to access and record the images that have been recorded by the camera system?
Yes.
And directing your attention back to April 25th of this year at approximately 5 p.m., was the camera system at the jail functioning?
Yes, it was.
And based on certain events that transpired at the jail, were you asked to make a copy of the images captured by the exterior cameras at the House of Corrections on April 25th of this year from approximately 5:15 p.m. through 6:15 p.m.?
Yes.
And who made that request?
The original request came from Sergeant Samarellis.
And were you able to put together a compilation of the images captured for that date and time?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to briefly go through cameras. Now this is entitled Camera 118. Are you familiar with this camera?
Yes.
And the time reflected in the lower right-hand corner, let's strike that. The date reflected in the lower right-hand corner, is that the correct date?
The date is correct.
Okay. And is the time in the lower right-hand corner, is that off?
The time is off.
Okay. And by approximately how many hours? Is it?
7 to 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. Each DVR is different.
Okay. And I just- So just scrolling through this quickly, just scroll quickly through approximately an hour. Was that a fair and accurate representation of that camera, what that camera recorded and collected on April 25th of 2010 from approximately 5:15 until 6:15 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is camera number 3, is that correct?
Yes.
Again, just to scroll through. image is captured by camera number 3 for that relevant time period on the 25th of April?
Yes.
And this is camera number 7, is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, is that a fair and accurate representation of the images captured by camera number 7 on date and time in question?
Yes.
And lastly, is camera number 6 it appears to be?
Yes.
And was that a fair and accurate representation of the images captured by that camera for that time period on the 25th of April?
Yes.
Based on what we just reviewed, does the information contained on the CD in this computer, are they fair and accurate representations of the images captured by those 3 cameras on April 25th and 2010 between the time of approximately 5 p.m. and 6:15?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, ask that this CD be marked as a full exhibit, obviously at the end of the trial.
Mr. Schroyer, any objection? Okay, we'll so mark that CD states exhibit number 1.
In addition to the camera system at the jail, are you familiar with signs posted around the jail property?
Yes, I am.
Can I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have this marked as states exhibit number 1 for ID. I'll do the CD as number 3, I guess. I have one more exhibit.
So this is going to be number 1?
That'll be number 1.
Okay.
I've already provided a copy to Mr. Truman. Show you what's been marked as states exhibit number 1 for identification purposes. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the sign.
And what is that? Represent? Is that the sign as it existed on April 25th, 2010?
Yes.
And I move at this point to have the ID stricken and enter as a full exhibit.
Mr. Schroyer, any objection?
No.
Thank you. We'll mark it, take it as a full exhibit, states number 1.
I can have this marked as for ID as states exhibit number 2.
Has Mr. Schroyer seen this?
He has a copy of it. Show you what's been marked as states exhibit number 2, which appears to be a schematic of the jail. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is an outline of the jail that we gave out to visitors.
Okay. That's a fair and accurate representation of the layout of the jail?
Yes.
That's the ID be stricken and marked as a full exhibit?
Any objection, Mr. Schroyer?
No.
We'll mark it then as a full exhibit, states number 2. I
point out the black dots that are marked on the schematic. The sign that exists in states number 1, is that sign located where those dots exist?
Yes, there are
on that
signs.
schematic?
in all of these locations.
Okay, so the dots reflect where the signs are posted around the jail, is that correct?
Yes.
Are there other places on the jail property where the sign also is?
They extend down the whole length of the driveway into the jail.
Okay, so that sign is represented in State's Exhibit Number 1, exists in the locations marked by the black dots on the schematic and all the way down the drive coming up to the jail, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Directing your attention back to April 25th of this year at approximately 5 p.m., were you on duty at the jail?
No, I was not.
At some point, were you made aware that there was an issue with some protesters at the jail?
Yes, I received a phone call from Sergeant DeTorris.
And what time was that, and what were you told?
It was approximately between 5:30 and 5:45. I was told that there was a large number of protesters at the jail.
And after you became aware of this from Sergeant DeTorris, did you contact Superintendent Van Wickler?
Yes, I did.
And what did he direct you to do?
He advised me to let Sergeant DeTorris know to tell them to leave, and if they did not leave, to call the police department.
Okay. And did you then direct Sergeant DeTorris to direct the people, the protesters gathered to leave the property?
Yes, I did.
And was it Superintendent Van Wickler that authorized you to give that order to DeTorris?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I don't know further questions.
Mr. Troyer, do you have any questions here for Mr. Muzzo?
Yes, it
All
is.
right.
Are you aware of Sergeant DeTorris giving any such order?
No, I don't follow the question.
His last question that you authorized Sergeant DeTorris to order the protesters to leave, correct?
Yes. On my arrival to the jail, I was advised that he had told everybody to leave.
Okay. But you did not observe him giving that order?
No, I did not.
Okay. The parking lot at the current location of the Cheshire County House of Corrections, is that a public parking lot?
I would, during certain times of the day, yes, that would be considered a public parking lot.
And what times are those?
At the business hours
Oh, what are the business hours?
or visits, basically between 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. you can visit.
The signs that are located around the jail structure, are those identical to the ones along the roadway into the structure?
Yes, they are.
Is there any indication on the signs that there's no trespassing beyond this point?
Those signs all say no trespassing. I don't know if they say beyond this point.
And the public parking lot is located beyond the first signs?
Yes, it is.
You were employed by the Cheshire County House of Corrections at its previous location in Westmoreland?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Are you aware of any similar demonstrations taking place there?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance?
Well, I'll allow him to answer the question if he knows.
I was aware.
Was there any substantive difference between those demonstrations and the one at which this arrest occurred?
I'm not sure I follow your question. Could you ask me again?
Was there any substantive difference in your mind between those demonstrations at Westmoreland and the one that occurred at the Marlboro location?
In Westmoreland, from what I have seen and heard and read, they were not as large. But I'm not sure what's substantive.
Okay, well, all right. So, was there ever any objection posed to the demonstrations that occurred at Westmoreland?
Objection, Your Honor, again, the relevance.
What's the relevance, Mr.
The relevance being that there's an established pattern of these demonstrations without objection, and therefore a belief that while on public property, without an order to leave, there's no trespass occurring.
I'll allow the question if the witness knows.
Could you ask me a question?
Was there, are you aware of ever any objection being posed to the demonstrations that occurred at the West Side?
I know that administratively wise, we felt it was very unsafe and did not care for it and had turned it over to law enforcement to be looked into.
Okay, but are you aware of any objections directed at the demonstrators?
We had no legal right at that location to tell you to leave.
Right. Now, is this sign is representative of all the no trespassing signs located at this facility?
Yes.
It states that this is a secure government facility, trespassers are subject to arrest and prosecution, defiance of any order to leave as a misdemeanor. It would that not imply that one is entitled to being ordered to leave before it would be considered trespassing?
Objection, Your Honor. The sign speaks for itself, and I guess that's an issue for the court to decide.
Well, I guess I'd be interested to know the answer to the question myself. I think, officer, the question is it considered trespassing until you're ordered to leave?
No, I don't think it's considered trespassing until we say you need to leave.
Is that the answer to your question that you're...
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any reason,
Can I say something further?
Go ahead, finish. If you've got something further in response to that question, go ahead.
After you reach a certain point at the jail, there are signs that say law enforcement only past this point. And from that section around the whole secure perimeter, that area, we are under the orders and the my understanding is that from that's a secured area. In there, you would be trespassing if you've gone past that area. There is signs that say law enforcement only. You go past that, we consider that.
objection, hearsay? Vehicles. Do you have evidence of those signs?
I have evidence, I'm telling you that, it's there.
Let me get clear in my own mind. Is Mr. Troyer being charged with trespassing in the so-called secure area or in the area that's represented by this sign?
The evidence will show that he walked around the secure area twice.
Okay, but the only evidence that has been introduced, at least at this point, is that this was the applicable sign in all of the areas that Mr. Troyer was in.
That is a sign that it goes around the perimeter of the whole jail facility. The witness just testified that there's also a sign, based on his personal knowledge, of law enforcement only going into this area.
Okay. Well, is it in that area or in sort of the generally warned area that Mr. Troyer is being charged?
For walking behind and in the secure area of the facility.
Okay, is it the state's position that he was in an area that he had been warned to stay out of by virtue of a sign and didn't need to be notified to leave?
The evidence will be essentially is that there's a combination of factors. In other words, that he was told, that the group was told to leave. And after they were told to leave, they then circled the jail, Mr. Troyer included, twice, including the secure area. That essentially is the evidence. So it's not a particular charge that he was told to leave. That's just part of the evidence that he shouldn't have been in this particular area.
Okay, well...
He was originally charged with it being personally directed to leave and thereafter not leave. That charge has been dismissed, and now we're just on a violation level, which it basically says knowing or believing that he's not supposed to be in any place, he's there. And the state's theory is that the combination of the signs coupled with the order which would put him on notice that he's not authorized to walk around the secure area of the facility on 2 occasions.
Well, is the state planning to introduce a copy of the sign that shows the so-called, I guess, prohibited area under any circumstances?
The law enforcement only sign?
Right.
It's based, no, we don't have a picture of that. It's just his testimony of his personal knowledge of that. We can also point it out on, we can point it out on the video. I don't think we have a close-up of it, but we can point it out on the video.
When you do that?
Go ahead, Mr. Troyer, with your question.
Can you state, to the best of your knowledge, what is the exact wording of those signs that you refer to?
That one just says law enforcement only.
Does it say law enforcement only, or does it say law enforcement vehicles only?
I guess I don't know the exact wording of that sign. It says some of the effect of law enforcement.
And it is a drivable area.
Yes, it is.
And do you have any reason to believe that I knew at the time before the arrest that I was on the premises without license or privilege to be there?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation. This witness wasn't even there. How would he even know? He's never testified that he even knew Mr. Troyer, or ID'd him when he was there.
Well, I guess I don't understand the question. Are you asking whether this witness knew whether you were there?
Well, as I recall, the charge states that I entered or remained on the premises knowing that I did not have license or privilege to be there, and I'm asking if he has any reason to believe that that is the case.
If he has any way of knowing whether you were aware of...
Yes.
I'll allow him to answer it if he knows.
I don't know how I can know that question, how I can answer that question.
All right. No further questions.
Mr. McLaughlin, anything else?
At the old jail, was there any signs, no trespassing signs?
There was not.
Okay, so there's no signs at the old.
There was not.
And at the old jail, Mr. Troyer asked about no prior complaints about them being there. At the old jail, do you have any information that anybody tried to open a door as they walked around the jail?
No.
Thanks, I have no further questions.
All right, all set? Mr. Troyer?
The last question seems to be an implication. Was there someone trying to open the door at this demonstration in question?
You're asking me if I...
Yeah, are you aware of any such thing?
Yes, I am.
All right, well, I was not aware of that. So.
Okay, well, just to be clear, that's nothing involving Mr. Troyer. No.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. You can step down. Welcome.
Okay, we call Sergeant Frank DeTorris. Swear the testimony about to give this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Yes. Please have a seat. Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Frank DeTorris, DeTurris.
And where you work?
Cheshire County Department of Corrections.
And how long you worked at the Cheshire County Department of Corrections?
Oh, a little over 4 years.
And what are your duties at the Cheshire County House of Corrections or Department of Corrections?
I'm the assistant second shift supervisor.
Directing your attention back April 25th at approximately 5 p.m. Were you on duty at the Cheshire County House of Corrections?
Yes, I was.
And at some point were you made aware that there was an issue with some protesters at the jail?
Yes.
And describe what you observed and what you did.
I saw a large group of individuals out in the parking lot. Went back and called Major Musa.
Okay. And what did, after a while, did Major Musso call you back?
Yes.
And what did he direct you to do?
He had me instructed, telling him to leave.
Okay. And after you received this order from Captain Musso telling you to tell them to leave, what did you do?
Well, I told him to leave.
Okay. When you say you went out and told them to leave, where did you go and where were they
Out
staying?
around the flagpole area.
Okay. And Did you tell him to leave once, or what did you say exactly, and how did you say it?
I told them they only need to leave or the police will be called.
And did they respond to you in any way when this order was being given?
No.
They didn't?
Well, they were, what I'm saying is, are we allowed to be here as a public property, private property?
Okay, so when you said you had to leave, people responded back to you, it's public property, it's not
Yeah.
private property, we don't have to leave, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at any point, did you hear a bullhorn being used?
Yes.
And was it when you were, at that time when you were out front with this group of people?
Yes.
Okay. And what, if anything, was, did you hear broadcast over the bullhorn?
I can't recall.
On April 25th, did you know Menno Troyer? I'm sorry, is it Menno or?
Yes.
Menno. Did you know Menno Troyer?
No, sir.
As a result of this incident, do you know him now?
Just by work.
Is this, when you just testified that you were out front and told them to leave, is this you here where I'm directing the arrow?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And this is the group as they were gathering?
Yes.
Now, as you're turning around to walk back, had you at that point already told them to leave?
Yes.
And what did they do, as far as you know, after you told them to leave?
Several did leave. Then they started walking on the building, getting back in the parking lot.
Okay, so some went back to the parking lot, some started walking around the building. And do you know what that sign says right there?
No trespassing.
That sign says no trespassing. And I showed you State's Exhibit number 1. Is that what's contained on that sign as posted there?
Yes.
And are there any other signs located around the building with regard to law enforcement personnel?
Yes.
And where are those signs?
Need to get more over that way.
Okay. sign you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
And do you know what that sign says?
I believe this is law enforcement only.
So, after you gave the direction for them to leave, you indicated some went back to the parking lot. Some then walked around the building. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Now, after you told them to leave, a group walked around the building, is that correct?
Yes.
And at some point, did that group come back by the front again?
Yes.
Okay, does this video still indicate this group coming back by?
Yes.
And are you outside at this point?
Yes, I am.
Is that you standing right there?
Yes.
So as this group walks by, what, if anything, do you say to them?
You guys believe the police coming?
So you again ask them to leave?
Yes.
Right. About that. Does that appear to be Mr. Menno?
Yes,
Excuse me, Mr. Troyer?
Yes, it does.
And does he also appear to be looking over in your direction at that point?
Yes, it does.
So after this first walk around, does the group then walk around the building yet again?
I don't know, another group, I'm not too sure if it was bigger.
Okay, but people walked around the building again?
Yes.
Okay. And when it became apparent to you the protesters weren't going to leave, you called the police?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they arrived at some point, I think?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, I have no further questions.
Mr. Troyer, any questions for the officer here?
Yes. The small sign that was pointed out to you by Mr. Block on the corner of the building, you said you believe that they said law enforcement only.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know for certain that that is the exact wording?
No.
When you said that you gave the order to leave, how did you say it? Did you raise your voice? Did you speak at a normal level?
I raised my voice.
You did raise your voice. Okay. Was there any response back from the group the second time?
No. Three guys looked at, waved.
From distance? Right?
Yeah, there was no vocalization there.
Okay.
Quick question.
Is that? Thank you, sir.
State call Sergeant Summerall. Swear the testimony you're about to give us matter will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please have a seat and introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Sergeant James Cemorellis, C-E-M-O-R-E-L-I-S.
C-E-M-O-R-E-L-I-S.
Thank you.
And where do you work?
I work for the Keene Police Department
And how long have you worked for the Keene Police Department?
since 1998.
Back on April 25th of this year, were you on duty at the Keene Police Department?
Yes, I was.
And what were your duties at that time?
I was assigned as the shift commander for the day shift.
And directing your attention to approximately 5:30 or 6 p.m. on that date, did the Keene Police Department receive a call about protesters at Housing Corrections?
Yes, I did.
And what was relayed to you by dispatch at that point?
I was told that the jail had called and that they reported that there were between 30 and 40 or so protesters on the jail property, that they had been asked to leave and that they were refusing to leave.
And at some point after this, did you then respond to the jail?
I did.
And when you got to the jail, what observations did you make at that point?
As I came in from 101, I saw several vehicles that were parked alongside the highway. I saw people down on the highway, like they were getting into their vehicles. I assumed they were leaving. There were others that appeared to be simply walking away. As I turned up into the road that leads towards the jail facility, I saw a few more people that were walking down the hill back down towards the highway. Again, these folks appeared that they were leaving, heading towards the highway as opposed to walking towards the jail. On my way, at some point this short road ends and becomes what I think is probably the actual entrance to the jail facility where the sign is located. Just shortly into, as I got into that road, I saw a group of about maybe 15 or a few more that were actually looked like they were heading up the road towards the jail. I continued on my way. I didn't see anybody else other than that initial group. When I got to the parking lot of the jail, there was nobody present there. And I drove around the flagpole area, which we've seen on the video, towards the front entrance there. That's where I met with Sergeant DeTorris.
And did he brief you on what had transpired up to that point?
He did. He informed me that there was a large crowd that had come up, that they were protesting and being unruly, and that he had ordered them to leave, and that they initially refused to, but then it looked like they had then complied and all went back down and left the area.
And while you were there, at some point, did the group show up and started walking around the jail?
What I noticed was the group that I referred to earlier that was walking up towards the jail facility did reappear on the property, and they followed the footprint around up beyond the public parking lot and beyond out and around the jail into the secured area of the jail, and then came back around towards the main flagpole area.
And after this occurred, we'll strike that. Are you familiar with the signs at the jail? And is there a sign posted near the drive that goes around the secure areas of the jail with regard to law enforcement?
Yes.
And what is your recollection of that sign?
In addition to the signs here that were submitted as evidence that go around the entire footprint, there is a single sign. If you're looking at the road, and I think you pointed out to it earlier on the video, there's a sign. My recollection is that it says law enforcement vehicles only.
And so after you observed this group walk around the jail and hadn't been briefed by Sergeant DeTorris, did you approach the group in a parking lot at that point?
I did. After they had reappeared on the, at the top of the hill up by the jail itself, I requested a number of other police units to arrive and waited for them to arrive. And in the time that it took them to arrive, the group had gone all the way around the jail and come back. I waited a few extra minutes as the group passed us and gathered into the main parking area. Some of them had immediately just taken off, and they were allowed to do so. There was another group, it ended up being 8 to 12 in all, that remained on the property. They were in a group. I believe there was a person who had a bullhorn who yelled over to our group of us officers asking if there was a party that they were missing, if they should join the party over here or something. It was clear that they had no intention to leave.
And at that point, did you approach a group of other officers and take people in custody?
At that point, the officers and I that were gathered there watching approached the group. I made an announcement to everybody that they were under arrest for criminal trespass, and they were all taken into custody.
And was Mr. Troyer one of the people taken into custody?
Yes, it was.
And is Mr. Troyer here in court today?
Yes, he is. He's seated at the defendant's table with the green shirt.
And may the record reflect the officer identified the defendant?
Yes, it will.
I want to go through some of this video. Did you ask the jail to put together a compilation of the exterior camera video?
I did.
And did you have an opportunity to review that?
Yes, I did.
And with regard to Mr. Troyer, this is camera 118. And is Mr. Troyer in this group?
Yes, he is.
And, well, is that Mr. Troyer?
Yes, it is.
And was that Sergeant DeTorris out front there?
Yes, it is.
camera just scanned and started to DeTorris again out front.
Yes.
And is Mr. Troyer and the group that's walking by in front of the House of Corrections?
The person on the left, the green shirt.
Right there?
Yes.
Really good camera. Now, based on the time, is this currently Mr. Troyer, or is he starting on his first walk around the facility?
Yes.
Right here.
Objection.
Objection?
How can the time be determined from this? Wasn't it already established that the time on the video is not correct?
No, I'll let you ask the witness that
Okay.
when you get a chance. Just a moment. And again, based on the differential in time, this being almost 20 minutes later, this appeared to be Mr. Troyer on his second walk around the facility.
Yes, it does.
Again, based on the earlier time, does that appear to be Mr. Troyer on his first walk around? I'm sorry. And last two. Based on the time, this appeared to be Mr. Troyer out back of his facility around the second walk around the facility.
Yes, please.
And does that also represent the person appearing to walk up to a door and grab onto the handle?
Yes, please.
After Mr. Troyer was arrested, he was processed and released.
Yes, he was.
I have no further questions.
Troyer, any questions here for the officer?
Can I enter?
Sure, what part, which one? Or you want to use, put your own?
Can I just go ahead?
What have you got here, Mr. Troyer?
It's a video that was taken by a member of the group at the time that the officers were approaching, as the group was leaving in the parking lot.
I guess I haven't been provided a witness list by Mr. Troyer. I haven't been provided, so I have no idea the foundation for this video. I haven't been provided a copy of this video ahead of time.
That was provided at the beginning.
No, I mean, no, prior to trial.
Right.
It was just shown to me, or it was just presented to me this morning.
So you haven't seen it yet?
I haven't seen it.
Well, do you want to take a look at it then before we...
If I could just have a second to talk to Mr. Troyer about what it represents and the relevance of it, then I may or may not have it.
Go ahead.
Is it? Okay, that's fine. We can play it.
Is this going to require some queuing up and that sort of thing?
You should, I presume it'll just move
There's
right up.
several ongoing things that needs to be.
It's the first one, yes. That one, the far left one.
The answer is?
It's flash.
Oh. I can never get it open when it's happening, so unless you have some trick.
Do you know?
I believe it's flash video.
Meaning,
You need flash installed. Free software.
so you hit one of these, which one?
Flash video would run it,
Media Player Classic would do it, I think.
or media player.
You could, do you have internet? Can you get to YouTube? No. No. Does anyone have a laptop? My laptop's down in the car. I could go get it.
Why don't you just ask the questions and see whether we need to present the video?
Frankly, this sort of thing happens to me a lot when I try to play something that came off of another computer, and I have a terrible time trying to open something like that. So it may not be possible to do it with this system, Mr. Troyer. Why don't you, as Mr. McLaughlin suggests, why don't you talk, maybe ask some questions, and perhaps that
Mr. Summerellis, at what point did you, immediately prior to making the arrest, at what point did you start following the group?
It's tough to remember exactly. I believe that there was a period of time where we walked from the front door of the building, and then we walked to the beginning of the sally port. We waited there for a short time. There were members of the group that had walked around the second time with you that actually left and did not get arrested. And it was a short time after that that we decided to come take action against
When you started walking toward the parking lot, was the group already in the parking lot or walking toward the parking lot as well?
in the parking lot.
That actually contradicts my recollection.
well, you'll have a chance to testify yourself if you like, Mr. Troyer.
Your Honor, if I may, I think the arrest is on.
It may be on one of the
Is that what you're asking about, Mr. Troyer, the arrest itself?
Yes. I believe that.
I could look to see the time.
What's the question? Is it about where you were at that point?
Well, I would like to establish that the officers were following the group as they went into the parking lot from a distance and never stopped. There wasn't much time lapse to leave.
Well, can you be a little bit more specific about where the officer was, where the group was, where that was in relation to his arrival?
As far as my recollection?
Well, I'm asking what his recollection was.
Correct. You're not ready. The videos. This is us.
Okay. Okay, is this the point where you start following?
You can see me start walking towards the group.
And at this point, are they in the parking lot?
Now you're in the parking lot. I'm waiting. people walking to their cars, several people walking away. Others still waiting. There's that group. People are joining that group. Those that were in their car are leaving, will allowed to leave. And that group that was standing there in a circle is the one that we ultimately ended up dealing with.
Now, did you state earlier that you observed somebody with a bullhorn? At this point?
I'm not sure if it was at this point or when they were coming around or at some point.
And now you're coming out to make the arrest?
Correct.
Now, you stated earlier that it was clear that they had no intention to leave.
That was my understanding. Those people that looked like they had an intention to leave left.
How could you, what did you base that understanding on?
I based it on the fact that I watched those people who appeared to be intending to leave actually do so. Those that I decided were not intending to leave to remain huddled in a group in the parking lot.
Indefinitely?
I don't think there's any argument that at some point, had I just not done anything, at some point between now and the time of eternity, I would most certainly have left the property. I'm guessing that it wouldn't have been there for years.
Was there any reason to believe that they were planning on returning back to the jail?
That was irrelevant at that point. You were trespassing to them. That's when we made the arrest.
When DeTorris asked us to leave, what do you estimate was the distance between him and the group?
Can you just clarify which time, Your Honor? Because the testimonies he asked twice. Once when he was out front with the main group, and then once again when he was walking by with a smaller group.
Okay.
Which time are you referring to?
Which time are you referring to here?
Actually, both times.
From the video, it looks like, and this is just a guess, maybe you were probably 30 to 40 feet the first time and maybe 20 feet or so the second time.
Okay.
May I interject something here?
No, sir.
Okay.
May I? I'm sorry, you can be called as a witness if somebody wants to do that, but
Okay, because I
well,
had a co-defense with Menno here, and
I'm sorry.
he does not have some information that I do have.
well, I'm
And
sorry.
I'd like to be able to convey it if I could.
You can convey it as soon as we're finished with this witness.
Okay, fine.
Now, when you were approaching, who arrested me personally?
I did.
Okay. When you were approaching the group, what did you say to them? in the parking lot?
Group?
Yeah, as you were approaching to make the arrest, what did you say to the group in general?
I said everybody's under arrest.
Did you say why?
I think I said somebody asked why, I said for criminal trespass.
Do you remember when they stated that we were all asked to leave and we did not leave? How far away from me did you estimate you were at that time? What did you do immediately after that?
I think I escorted you into the cell.
Okay. And as you were approaching me, do you recall what I said to you?
No.
All right.
set, Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Thank you, officer.
State reps, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Troyer, the state presented all the evidence it's planning to present here. You have the opportunity now to present any evidence that you want to present in your defense, including testifying in your defense. You're not obligated to do that, as you know, I'm sure. If you decide to give up your right not to testify and to come up here, be sworn in, and give your testimony, then you also entitled Mr. McLaughlin to ask you some questions when you're finished. Okay? Do you have any witnesses that you want to call, sir?
Can I call witnesses that were present that got arrested as well?
Or are these people whose cases have not yet been heard or have been heard?
Have been heard.
You're welcome to call anyone whom you think can give relevant evidence. Mr. McLaughlin, of course, will have the option to object to any testimony that he thinks is irrelevant. So,
Okay.
subject to that, you're welcome to call witnesses.
Okay. Call the Jim Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, here, please. Can I just stop and stand here, face the judge, raise your right hand?
Your Honor, just so the court's fully aware, Mr. Johnson was tried earlier, was convicted of a Class A misdemeanor. He did not testify in that trial, and he's since appealed it to the Superior Court. So he's got some Fifth Amendment, exposure to testify.
All right, you understand that, Mr. Johnson? The issue is this, apparently. Your case has been heard here. You were found guilty, apparently, at least that's what's represented, of a Class A misdemeanor, criminal trespass. You've apparently appealed that to the Superior Court and will be entitled there to a new trial, including a jury trial. So, you didn't give any testimony apparently at the trial here, but because this is a public proceeding and is being recorded, anything that you would say here about the situation could potentially be used against you at the new trial that you're going to have in Superior Court. So you may be potentially incriminating yourself by testifying in this case. All right? So you have the right, obviously, not to incriminate yourself. So you have the right not to testify, or at least to testify about anything that might incriminate you. So, you clear about the status of things?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to testify, or you do, including potentially giving incriminating evidence?
Yes.
All right. You raise your right hand. Do you swear your testimony here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm, yes.
Would you have a seat there, please? And would you begin, sir, by stating your full name and spelling your last name?
James Leroy Johnson. Johnsson.
Mr. Troyer, what questions would you like to ask Mr. Johnson?
Are you asking me to ask them or tell you?
No, you ask Mr. Johnson the questions that you want him to respond
Okay.
to.
Were you present on April 25th when
Yes.
this arrest was made? Okay. Were you aware of any order that was given to the group
An order was-
by a law enforcement officer or jail personnel?
An order was not given personally to anybody in the group.
Did you observe law enforcement or jail personnel telling the group to leave?
I couldn't hear what he was saying.
No further questions.
Mr. McLaughlin?
So your testimony is that when you were up near the flagpole area and Sergeant DeTorris was out front, you couldn't hear what he was saying?
That's correct.
And were you present for the trial involving Sean Murphy?
I was.
And did you hear Mr. Murphy testify that he, in fact, heard someone with a bullhorn indicate that they've asked us to leave?
I don't recall his testimony, no.
You don't recall him saying that he didn't hear Sergeant DeTorris telling him to leave, but he heard someone in the group with a bullhorn telling him to leave?
I don't recall Sean's testimony, no.
And how far were you from Sergeant DeTorris, would you estimate, when you were out front?
I don't have any estimate of his distance away from me. Yes.
So this is you standing right there?
I can't make out anything.
Would that be you there with a sword?
Yes, I just turned around and was facing those people.
Okay, this is Sergeant DeTorris. and this
I
is
have
General
no
Simmons. You don't know?
I do not.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would like to add, though, that since evidence from other trials are admissible, this Sergeant DeTorris was determined a mumbler. It's the reason he's being accused of a violation where I was accused of a misdemeanor. And that the judge at that time...
Mr. Johnson, wait a minute. This is not a time for you to be giving a speech. You can respond to questions. If Mr. Troyer has another question for you, you can answer that, but otherwise, not. Mr. Troyer, any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Were you present at the trial on August 29th?
I'm not familiar with the date.
Warren area.
Yes, I was there.
Okay. Was it established then that the group did not hear the order to leave?
Objection? Your
Yes, it
Honor?
was.
Relevance? I asked him about his recollection of prior testimony, not any sort of finding.
His recollection of
Of the prior testimony at that particular trial. And I didn't ask him about the court's finding in that particular case. So I'm not sure the relevance of the court's prior finding in that particular case to this matter.
I guess, Mr. Troyer, your question was it established at a prior trial? And I guess I don't really understand what your question is. By established, do you mean, did the court find at a prior trial that the group wasn't notified to leave? Or was it established by testimony from some witness that that the group was not told to leave?
Well, I guess my question would be, did the court indicate that its decision was influenced by the fact that the group did not hear the order?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Troyer, was the court influenced? I don't know how I would take that evidence into account, unless it's in a court decision of some kind. I don't know how I would know how another judge might have been affected by testimony like that. So, well, okay. Well, any other questions for Mr. Johnson here?
Did the court, did the judge in that trial state that he was reducing the charge on that basis?
Objection.
Yes.
Reducing what charge on what basis?
From a misdemeanor to a violation on the basis that the group did not hear the order.
And what trial are we referring to?
The trial that took place here on August 29th for four of my co-defendants in this arrest.
So the question again then is, at that prior trial, did the judge, what?
My charge was reduced from a misdemeanor to a violation, and it was at that trial that it's my belief that the...
Well, okay. Mr. Troyer, if you want to give your belief about something, you're going to need to testify about it. Okay, so if you have a question for the witness, then try to be as specific about it as you can, and we'll see whether or not Mr. McLaughlin has an objection.
Okay. How did the judge indicate that the charge is dropped from a misdemeanor to a violation?
Objection, Your Honor. You can't, co-defendants are tried all the time. One co-defendant might be found not guilty, another one may be found guilty. The fact that a co-defendant was found not guilty or found guilty of a lesser offense is not admissible in the next defendant's trial. I mean, that's essentially the root of what his questions are about. And the law is clear that that's just inadmissible.
Said that I was a part of the group.
Well, again, I don't think that's been established through your testimony, Mr. Troyer. There was another witness who testified that somebody in that group appeared to be you. Okay, that's the evidence of that. But the fact that one person in a group, depending on where they may have been at the time, may not have heard something versus somebody else having heard it who was closer to the source, perhaps. I don't think these things are necessarily. So, I'm not prepared to take a statement that may have applied under different circumstances as being relevant to this situation.
Understood. All right, no further questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, so just to be clear, Mr. Johnson, based on that video that we saw, you're saying that in the area where you were identified as standing sort of over on the other side of the circle there, you're saying that from that location you did not hear anyone tell you or anyone else in the group to leave? All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Troyer, any other evidence you want to introduce here?
Ian?
Well, it's up to you. It's up to you.
I would like to introduce Ian Bernard.
Ian Freeman.
Ian Freeman.
Come on up here, please, sir. All right. You swear your testimony here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I affirm I'll tell the truth.
Thank you, sir. Would you begin, sir, by stating your full name and spelling your last name?
Ian Freeman, F-R-E-E-M-A-N.
All right. Mr. Troyer, what questions do you have for Mr. Freeman?
Were you present in April point that had the demonstration and when the arrest was made?
I was.
Did you hear anybody give an order telling the group or anyone who was leave?
I've never heard anything like that.
No further questions.
McLaughlin? Did you see the video of the group in the area of
Many
the
times.
flagpole there? Okay. Where in that area were you, sir? Well, where in relation, for example, to Mr. Johnson? He was pretty readily identifiable because
Probably
of his...
about 50 feet closer to the parking area. Not further away.
Okay, and do you remember...
Maybe further than that. I'm not good at estimating.
Do you remember seeing Mr. Troyer there?
Oh, yeah, he was arrested with me.
All right. Where was he? If you recall, do you know where he was at the time you were there in the vicinity of the flagpole when it's alleged that people were advised not to leave?
I cannot recall that.
You don't remember where he was in relation to
There's a
you?
big group of people there.
Any other questions? Mr. Troyer, are you all set with Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Mr. Troyer, anyone else?
No, I mean, I could call more, but I think I'm all set.
All right. Do you want to testify yourself here, sir?
I would like to, yes.
All right. Okay, and just to be clear again, I think I mentioned it already, you have a right, a constitutional right not to testify by being sworn in and giving your testimony. You're waiving that right and also entitling Mr. McLaughlin to ask you questions about the situation. All right, you prepared to testify, Ben? Yes. All right. You swear your testimony here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Have a seat there. Would you, just for the record, please state your full name and spell your last name?
Menno, Troyer, T-R-O-Y-E-R.
What would you like to say, Mr. Troyer?
I just want to state that I was very much not aware of any order being given that day. I was aware that there was that potential, especially considering that law enforcement officers had gathered on the site. And I was watching closely after the law enforcement officers had gathered. I was watching closely for such an order to be given. And I was fully prepared to leave immediately if such an order is given. And as a matter of fact, when they were approaching us to arrest us, I thought that's what they were doing. I thought they were approaching us to tell us to leave. I was there to participate in a peaceful demonstration, and I had absolutely no interest in conducting any civil disobedience.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Troyer?
No. Other than the fact that, based on the fact that we had, well, the people that I knew had conducted similar demonstrations at the Westmoreland site, and I've been there once or twice for such demonstrations. And based on my belief that it was a public area and that we were entitled to an order to leave before we would get arrested, I did not believe that I was violating laws or rules.
All set?
How's that?
Mr. Troyer, the old jail didn't have any no trespassing signs, is that correct?
I don't know. I'm not aware of any.
In the new jail, you no dispute that you walked around what's been described as a secure area in the new jail twice, is that correct?
I don't dispute that I walked around that area at that time. I was not aware that it was a secure, or called a secure area.
Well, the signs indicate that this is a secure government facility, correct?
That was all the way back to the entrance.
I understand, but the signs went all the way around the jail, is that correct?
Right, including encompassing the public parking lot.
And there was an additional sign along the road that you walk by indicating law enforcement vehicles only, correct?
Yes.
And you walk by that sign twice when you walk around the facility, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And nevertheless, in light of all this signage that didn't exist at the jail, you felt that it was okay to walk around the jail.
The signs mention in order to leave that we can be arrested if we defy an order to leave, and I believe that I would receive an order to leave before I would be subject to arrest.
Actually, the signs say you'd be subject to arrest for a misdemeanor if you defy an order, correct?
I believe so, based on the picture that I've seen today, yes.
But the sign also indicates no trespassing secure government facility, is that correct?
Yeah.
Before you step down, Mr. Troyer, I just want to be clear about what you're saying. It's been shown several times, the group standing around the flagpole area out in front. And the officer who allegedly, Sergeant DeTorris, who says he gave an order to leave at that point, is it your testimony that you heard no such order at that point near the flagpole?
Correct. I was not even aware that he had talked to the group.
Do you remember seeing him there?
I remember seeing jail personnel standing there, yes. I did not know him or know who it was.
And it's your testimony that you heard nothing that any of the jail personnel said at that point?
Correct.
And so it's your testimony that you were awaiting some other order from at some other point?
Once the law enforcement started to arrive, I expected that they would approach us and tell us to leave, at which point I was prepared to leave. I did not know of any other reason why law enforcement would come.
Mr. McLaughlin?
After law enforcement arrived, you chose to walk around the second time, is that correct? Walk around the secure portion of the building.
Along with the rest of them, yes.
Okay, so you saw law enforcement arrive, you saw the people out, the guards out front,
Yes.
and you decided to walk around the secure portion of the building a second time.
Yes, along with, I was staying with the group, yeah.
And the first time you walked around, you saw the video where you walked by, you walked all the way around, then you walked by the front near the flagpole area. Your testimony is that you didn't hear Sergeant DeTorris say anything about you had to leave. Is that right?
All set, Mr. Troyer? Okay. Step down. Any other witnesses or evidence that you want to introduce here, sir? No? All set, Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, sir.
Anything further you want to say here? Mr. Troyer, anything further you want to say here about the state of the evidence?
No.
No? Okay. I've got some notes, I've got some exhibits, I'll have a CD. I'd like to have a chance to take a look at those things before making a decision. So I'll do that, and I'll make a written order and advise you to that effect, Mr. Troyer. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
This This program is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.